My name is Judith Denton, and I am the founder of The Transformed You. I noticed that whilst we were mentoring Black children in the care system, I was having to do that extra. And when I say that extra, over and above the program, the mentoring program, I'd rock up to schools or to their foster care placements or their residential homes with combs to comb their hair or braid their hair or cane braid their hair, or creams in my bag because they'd be like, okay, their skin was quite ashy. And some of them would ask me for certain foods. And I'm thinking, okay, your in care and your foster carer or your support worker should know that you need these things. So I began to ask questions on the national scope as to how are Black children across the country being taken care of. And it wasn't very good to hear some of the experiences that they were going through. So in 2020, I set up the Black Care Experience to start to make a difference in the lives of Black children in the care system, and also to make sure that people can see them. Because if they're in the care system and they're not being cared for, that means you don't see that child's need. You don't see them. You don't see their colour. You don't see that they need extra support because of how they need to be raised in the care system. So that's why I set up the Black Care Experience.
So hi, my name's King. I go by the artist name Soul, and I'm a care experience singer-songwriter. And recently I've taken a passion in narrative and film. Most of what I do is to highlight the essential need to heal from someone's past. I think that we are the writers of our own stories. Regardless of what gets thrown into our chapters, we choose how to navigate those things.
So I'm a Philly native, and when I say Philly, Philadelphia, I love Philadelphia. I was born and raised here. Philly has given me the tools that I need to succeed in most environments.
But there is a big population that I feel personally has been just kind of dropped off and it's not cared about. So I feel like a lot of that is our young people, because a lot of them are facing homelessness, poverty in areas that we actually live in.
Philadelphia. Of course, you're going to think about cheesesteaks, number one. That's our specialty. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's all bad because Philly is so big. Everybody going to know somebody.
I'm born and bred in North Philly, through and through. Like, I love my city. You have compassionate people. You have loving people, empathetic people, back in the day where you can go to your neighbor and like, give me a cup of sugar, or can you help my children go to school, or can you have, you had aunties and big mamas, we used to call them, right? We had this village, even though it was a crime-ridden, impoverished project. You still had this entire village surrounding individuals that I think a lot of people don't necessarily see.
Philadelphia, we're obviously a very diverse city. I think we're one of the largest but poorest cities in the United States. And that obviously plays a role in who we work with and the system within we work. We do, like many other states, have a large disproportionality of Black and brown children who come into the system, and they do not always see themselves represented within the system.
Uncomfortable and unsafe with the prominence of guns available and guns on the street. I say every night, let's have one day without a shooting, and I haven't gotten there yet. People kind of want to designate that to certain neighborhoods based on their income or the racial dynamics, but it's all over. And I'm not sure what contributes to that. I know that it causes young people trepidation. I can think of one young man who was almost graduated from high school. His parent had to move to a different neighborhood, which meant he had to travel through another neighborhood. He stopped going to school because it was unsafe for him to do that. We don't want that. We want people to be able to take a deep breath, relax, be comfortable. There's, when you hear about, somebody had an argument over, I don't know, a parking space, and then there's a shooting, that's not what we want to be about. And yes, Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, and we want it back that way.
So, my name is David Fair. My pronouns are he and him. And I've been working in the child welfare system in Philadelphia since really the year 2000, 24 years ago.
Hello, my name is Ayana Hughes. My pronouns are she and her.
Okay, Sydney Irving Descent. I'm the Deputy Director at Turning Points for Children. Been in my current role for a year, but prior to that was Operations Director responsible for the KUAs.
Okay, my name is Ivy Burrows. I'm the lead LifeSet specialist here at LifeSet. I have been working in social work for about a good 7 years now, working with this demographic of young people for the last 4 or 5.
My name is Kat. Full name is Caitlin Sturgill. I am the director of the LifeSet program here in Philadelphia.
Well, my name is Lanaya Little. I go by she, her. My position, I now is a peer outreach specialist for LifeSet, for Turning Points for Children.
My name is Lauren Pointer. I am the REUP 215 Diversion Program lead, and so my pronouns are she and her.
My name is Nicole Hill. I'm 20. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a peer outreach specialist here at Turning Points for Children.
My name is Shamara Dockery Johnson. I am a specialist at LifeSet Philadelphia. I have been a social worker for the past 5 to 6 years.
Hello, my name is Stevana Ragsdale. I could tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 22 years old. I joined this program about a year ago, I think. The LifeSet program. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So LifeSet is a very different program than a lot of other social work programs in the city. I would say that we're unique because we meet on a one-to-one basis with our young people, and I think that's very, very beneficial for them. I also would say that we're working on things that they want to work on. So it's not court-ordered, it's not through anything that they don't want to work on, it's simply what they want. So if they tell me, Miss Ivy, I want to get my driver's license, okay, we're going to work towards those goals. Miss Ivy, I want to go to school. Okay, we're going to work towards that. It's youth-led, and I think that's why it's a really great program for our young people. So we work with the people between 17 to 23. In a lot of the cases I see right now are young people who want to go to school or want to figure out how to get their vital documents. So I do a lot of that work just with them as far as making sure they have their birth certificate, how to get it, how to get their license, how to get their social security cards, stuff like that. I also work with them on deeper issues like going through grief or figuring out how to navigate a hard situation, setting healthy boundaries and things of that sort. So the LifeSet specialist role for me is a lot. It encompasses a lot because it's more of a mentorship. So because we don't have a clear thing that we have to follow every month, we do use an evidence-based model, which is Youth Villages. However, we don't have to just go by a book, and it's not cookie cutter. So it's very unique to every young person, and I really enjoy that because I think that our young people benefit more from it being personalized towards their needs versus it just being, oh, well, this program will work for this thing for everyone. It's not an all-encompassing program. It's more of a personalized kind of journey, and I'm really appreciative of that for them as well.
I would say LifeSet is kind of like a second family, a second positive growth developed family because I wouldn't call everybody my family because at a point I didn't call my family. So LifeSet was like my family. Like they love, care for you, they're hands-on. So yeah, it's kind of like when you're younger, you had a big sister and big brother organization. That is kind of what LifeSet is, but you can have it could be a big sister, it could be someone you look up to like as a mentor, a support person, a counselor even. and it's more hands-on because you see them weekly. So, and you can tell them, and they're trustworthy, so you can tell them certain things. Yeah.
What made me become a social worker is I wanted to support the young youth that we have in Philadelphia. And with the LifeSet program, we touch on every base with our young people. We really care, and we provide resources, and we also provide support. I also like to add that we add mentorship as well. I feel like the program within itself, it allows the young people to enter the world with more knowledge that they did not have prior to entering into the program of LifeSet. I feel like LifeSet gives the participants an opportunity to see more in themselves. And I feel like the specialists at LifeSet Philadelphia, I feel like that's what we do. We instill positivity, resources, and also adulthood, because after LifeSet, we like them to have that they have everything. They might not have everything but they have the basis. Like, they know how to obtain a driver's license. They know how to obtain documentation, vital records if they need to. They know how to utilize public transportation. They know how to be ready for a job interview. They also know how to just do simple things such as finding community resources. And these are things that we help with LifeSet. And I feel like this is an awesome program. And this is the reason why I became a social worker. And I feel working at this job and working for LifeSet Philadelphia is a way for me to give back, and it's a way for not the job too. How's everything going with the second job? Have they got back to you yet?
So no, the second job didn't get back to me yet, but I was thinking about just like probably not doing that job. So it's similar to a job I already do.
Okay.
Like, it's both home health aid.
Yeah.
So I'm probably just going to say that I've had an amazing experience with this program, just because strictly off the strength of my mentor. Like, she's the only person I really talk to from the program. I talk to other people, but that's my girl. So for the most part, when we first met, I felt really comfortable with her as far as sharing my identity, kind of, just because she's a black woman. She's like me, you know. So we hit it off pretty fast. We always been pretty comfortable talking about like my religion and stuff. She's always very interested in learning about my religion. She'll like ask me questions about it. I'll tell her about like me going to the masjid, or like how I ended up taking my shahada anyway, because I only took my shahada about a year ago. So she asked me a lot of questions, which makes me feel like really comfortable with her, just because like she's interested in, you know, who I am and my religion. So her just being very just observative and asking me a lot of questions about it makes me feel more comfortable to like open up to her. So yeah, that's really helped me, just having somebody outside of like my regular friends and family to talk to about my religion, or just about anything in general. I think really has helped me in the past year with like, I don't know, I'll say finding my identity maybe, because I feel like the past like 2-3 years is really when I started to find myself. Like, before I was just like a teenager doing me, but right now is when I first started to like find my identity, figure out who I am. And she's helped me a lot with that. So yeah. I wouldn't say change, but just to add to the program in general would just be more like meeting up maybe with like the other participants in the program. I would like to do, because me personally, I'm kind of introvert. I don't have many like friends. I got about 2 friends. So just being able to get out there and experience maybe other people that's my age, and just get to know them, talk to them, maybe have like a little, I don't know, a picnic or some type of outing with all of the participants would be really nice, just so we can like have kind of network and get different resources from them as well, instead of just my mentor. Because I feel like since I've joined the program, I've only met with her. Like, I haven't really met any of the other participants or any of the other social workers or anything. Pretty much just been me and her rocking out. So I would really like that if they did like more community outings maybe with the participants, just for us to get to know each other. And we be needing somebody that's our age as well, not just like somebody that's older to give us advice. Sometimes we be wanting like, you know, maybe a friend that's our age that we could talk to as well, meet up with. So I would really like that. If they could add that, that would be great.
For me, the young people that we serve in Philadelphia, for me, I look just like them, so I feel like that makes my job a little easier, because I'm not a far off stranger to where I can't connect with them. Normally when the kids, they'll see someone that looks like them and they're like, oh wow, I can be comfortable now. like I can talk a little bit more. You know, they're still a little apprehensive about opening up, but I feel like when they see someone that looks like them, they're a little bit more receptive to talking. Also, I also try to meet them where they are. I never try to make them more or less than what they are. I always ask them about themselves. I'm always curious about getting to know them as individuals and not what I have on the paper in front of me. For our young people, when you can identify, and it's just trying to find that little way to get inside of them for them to trust you. Again, with me looking like them, sometimes they are more apt to like, okay, and if I say something that's more relatable to them, they're like, oh, she gets me, she knows me. And that's just me just trying to find a little way into how I can connect with them on a more personal level. And that's just meeting them where they are. A lot of our young people, they are Muslim in Philadelphia. So a lot of times that we provide support for them, but I also like to ask them, do they have any other supports, such as like religions, family members, because a lot of them, they are hopeless within the sense of figuring out what's next from day to day, and how am I going to live my life, and how am I going to do this, and how am I going to get this, and how am I going to accomplish this. And I feel like when that's met with those questions from our individuals, young, black, and brown, and then they can ask the specialist that looks like them. They're not more like they're less afraid, or they're more comfortable to come to me with certain questions that they may not ask someone else that doesn't look like them, or they are more closed off and more sheltered to where they don't want to express themselves because they feel like you're just not going to get it. So I feel like with the specialists that we have and the diversity that we have, I feel like the young people are able to connect with us, especially about the religious.
It's something that we move away from a lot in the community is that holistic approach about families and rebuilding that village. It's hard for me to talk about racism and poverty because that's what I come from. You know, I'm already the double standard of being an African American and being a woman. And that comes with its own double standard stigma by itself. So it's normal for me to receive less pay or fight harder for opportunities. And I think that's why I can relate to our young people.
Right, we have a very rich and deep history here. But with that also comes a history of poverty and racism and very big systemic issues.
Decades of reinforcement of systemic racism playing out in full view of everybody with hardly anybody seeing it. But that we were not only just breaking up the family of the child, we were breaking up the family in a larger sense itself. And I asked simple questions in those days, since part of my job was keep kids out of the system. Why don't we just engage other members of the family to take care of these children?
Families, a system that is harming families, and a system that is built to perpetuate the false narrative. It was built on the laws that was perpetuated from racism. And as soon as we acknowledge that, which we're getting there, we have some great activists and advocates, and we do some great work in Philly and abroad surrounding a lot of this narrative work.
Black history actually serves as a means to empower Black students, not just about their history, but about themselves, to help them develop a sense of their own agency. So I just get really, really frustrated when I read about Black history in schools and what's being done to stop it. I read an article a few months ago where a Black teacher quit because she's not allowed to use the words Black excellence. because they said by using the words Black excellence, she was putting a preference on one race over the other. And I just thought how absolutely ridiculous that is. But like, this is like nothing new, right? For those of us who truly study Black history, education has always been one of the biggest tools of white supremacy, right? If you are on a labor camp and you were caught learning or teaching somebody else to read or write, as an enslaved person, you could be killed. You could lose literally your life over the attempt to become more educated. And it just seems like that the denial of Black history to Black kids has just, it doesn't go away. And there are people like me and many others who are not as scared to teach that history, but I don't think we should let that ever take away from those who are trying to keep it out of schools and classrooms. It's crazy to me. Any student can take AP European history, but you can't take AP African American Studies. So it's like you're allowed to learn about the colonizer, but not the colonized.
At the Defender Association in the Child Advocacy Unit, because we are a part of the Defender Association, I think that it has become evident that there is systemic racism, not just in the criminal justice system, which is the majority of the Philadelphia clients that the Defender Association represents, but because we're a subset of that within the child welfare system, that there's also systemic racism. And that's part of why I said the piece about like, we cannot criminalize poverty in our cases, because that's not, poverty in and of itself does not mean that you are unable to care for a child. It might just mean that you need some more resources or some assistance here and there. And so I think that our office specifically is set up in an interesting way to kind of try to navigate both of those systems as they exist, and as they exist for our clients. I think that we see it sometimes within the foster homes that and the group homes that our clients are placed in. I will say that, at least in my experience, it does generally seem that more foster parents tend to be Black and brown, but you still run into issues of, okay, do you know what this client needs if they are a different religion than you? Like, let's say if the foster parent is Christian, but our client is Muslim, do you know that they need a prayer mat? Do you know what time that they pray? Do you know when Ramadan is and what that means for this client? Do you know, just any of that kind of stuff? Because on a daily basis, those should be the people that are advocating for our clients in school and at home. I think that we also run into it sometimes when there are white foster parents who have a Black or brown client placed in their home. Do you know how to do their hair? Have you asked permission if you would like to get their hair done or their hair cut or whatever the situation might be? Because obviously that cultural competency becomes even more important. And I actually don't know what the foster care regs say about that. Like, if there is a class where foster parents have to take cultural competency or not. I would hope that there would be. But I think sometimes it could be so easy to just say like, oh, our clientele is diverse, without actually diving into what that means and maybe why that is. Even at the University of Pennsylvania, I know that we took a class in child welfare. I don't know if we ever, and it could just be me not remembering versus it not happening, but if we ever actually talked about why the child welfare system started versus how it is today. And so I think and I guess I'll bring that back to how it becomes, in my mind, even more important that we do have credentialed social workers on staff, people who either by choice, because you decided to get a bachelor's of social work or a master's of social work, have had that education, or that if you're not a credentialed social worker, that you maybe have taken some time to educate yourself on the system in which we work. I think it's so important, because any system could have been started for a very specific reason and has kind of divulged into what we have today.
What's been really important is, right, as attorneys and people who understand the law and the limitations of the law in this country, but also wanting to protect the civil rights that have been hard fought for Black people here in this country, and honestly, that are not all realized yet. There's so much work to be done there, which is why, I'm doing and running this policy, advocacy and policy department, but I still uphold my legal license, like my license to practice law, and I still believe, like, fundamentally in civil rights and the rights that we work toward and on behalf of children, like upholding, right, our civil rights. But we also acknowledge that these are basic human rights. The rights for people to have food, right? The right for people to have housing, the right for families to stay together. These are basic human rights outlined, right, in the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. It explicitly talks about a right to family and a right for people to parent. And so with that, we have this brilliant attorney that we work with at Children's Rights who has some background in international law and international work. And there was an opportunity for us to really sort of break our work out into the international world around the experiences of Black children and families. And what we found is that even though the United States has not signed and ratified, tons of treaties, they have signed and ratified a few, one of which is the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. The U.S. has both signed and ratified that. And so when we looked back over sort of what the UN body that oversees the ICERD, it's called the UN body that oversees it is called the CERD, the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. What we saw is that they've examined many aspects of U.S. policy and practices and where the U.S. is falling in terms of eradicating or eliminating discrimination. We got a long ways to go, right? And one area that they've looked at really intensely was the rights of Indigenous children and families within the U.S. and the work to be done there. And there was also some attention to the rights of migrant children and families separation happening at the border. But what we didn't see was an acknowledgement or understanding or realization about Black family separation in the US and the discrimination that happens for Black families. And so that's the issue that we wrote to the CERD and said, can you please also consider the ways in which the U.S., through its family policing and other systems, discriminates against Black children and Black parents? And they said yes. And so we wrote a report to detail for them how family policing and racism work together to oppress children and families and to keep families apart here in the U.S. And with that, we went to the UN and did some advocating, right? I'm wearing this shirt right now by Joyce McMillan, who is an advocate and a real force for keeping families together and speaking out against the harm of the family policing system and the white supremacy that resonates within it. So I went with Joyce, and I went with my colleagues at Children's Rights, another person that I really value and respect. Her name is Angela Burton, and we went and we talked to the UN and testified about Black family separation. And I think we had people saying, well, they might not hear you the first time. You're gonna have to go back repeatedly, right? But this was in 2022, and we got their recommendations, their concluding observations, and they did, in fact, right then, the first time that we went, they included observations about the family policing system and the discrimination against Black children and families in the U.S. and named all of these things that the U.S. needs to do to work toward changing those experiences and eliminating the discrimination that takes place.
Oftentimes, especially in Philadelphia, I can say not just Philly, a lot of times in our nation, is a real stigma connected to the agency or connected to like a social worker from a child welfare agency. Like in the Black community where, it's 52% of all our children before the age of 18 is going to be investigated. Like how much trauma is that? So we're automatically fearful. There's no one in my community, within my circle, within my family that the system hasn't touched. So it's not shocking that, I don't trust you. I don't want you to come into my house. I'm fearful. I don't want to tell you about my needs or maybe what my family might need because I'm scared of the punitive measure. I'm scared of what's going to come next. If I tell you I'm struggling, and you take me struggling as evidence to take my children or to keep my children away from me, what kind of help am I actually going to receive? So kind of turning that on its head is at least what I love to think that, parents do. It's I'm really there. You can tell me you're struggling and it's not going to go past me. You can tell me you need these things and I'm not going to get on a stand. I'm going to be a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on.
We look at other countries and other places, right, that think the U.S. is a model for protecting children and keeping children safe. And we want to be really loud and clear that this model that was built, that we were all handed, isn't working. That children have described it not as a system of care, not as a system of healing, not as a place where, they feel happy and comfortable, right? This is not working for Black children that are caught up in this system or for Black families. And we want the world to know that there's a ton of work and advocacy and efforts happening here to do right by Black children and by Black families and families who come into contact with this system. And so with that, as I think about sort of some of the narrative work that we're doing and the changes that we want to see, a huge part of it is that the U.S. doesn't have a safety net that really is there to support and help families. And just help them to care for people, right? That doesn't exist, but that's a part of what we want to build and create. And I see a lot of work being done to build and create this idea of a safety net within the child welfare system. And that's really dangerous to me, right? There's all this work around prevention. What are you preventing, right? You've already identified and decided that certain people are at risk of abusing or neglected their children. And I just want to go back to humanity and being humans, right? Why can't we instead decide we want to help humans? We want to help people to be better, to do better. We want to support them when they have needs, And I think it's really dangerous. And I think a lot of lived experts will agree with me that it's really dangerous to try to build a safety net within a system that has been harmful, that has been traumatic, that people have identified and described as a policing system. And there's so much distrust, right? And why should I have to go to this system for help when the threat of having my child taken away is still there? And this system will be the same system that comes to do that, So instead, I want to see work happen, and we're trying to make things happen to build those supports and funding streams outside of the child welfare system. And we're doing that by looking at, what are drivers into this system? What are things that are leading people to have contact with this system, right? And one of those things is obviously living in poverty. So why can't we build more universal basic income programs, right? Why can't we provide cash to people? During the pandemic, we saw that when we gave cash to people, right, neglect findings went down, people were using the money to provide for their children, to get food, to pay rent, right? When we had a moratorium on evictions during the pandemic, we saw how that was positive for children and for their families, right, to stay together. And now we see across the country there are pilot programs popping up for universal basic income. That's the kind of work that we need to do here in the U.S. to keep families together, to keep children safe and in their communities and with their people, you know? And we also see work around getting rid of and trying to peel back these layers of harmful and discriminatory and racist laws that exist. And that's going to be a journey, you know? But there's so much data, so much evidence about how these laws have been harmful. And we just want people to like start listening. Right? And also when you hear it, don't think there's nothing we can do about it. This law's been in place for hundreds of years. We can't think like that, right? We have to say we can do something about it, right? We have lawmakers who are hearing us and listening, and we can like do better. We know what the outcomes are. We know how harmful the legislation has been. And now we just need people who are bold enough to act on that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I get, I guess, the advantage of doing is after 20 plus years of being involved in this work is also reflecting on that work. And one of the things I have become convinced of is that that we as a legal profession, and I think I would make the same argument for the social work profession, we have contributed to perpetuating these false narratives that are woven into the system, even as we've sought to critique the system or change the system or reform the system. It's a large part of why I no longer consider reform as truly an option and really believe that abolition is the path forward. And I think what people most often misunderstand about abolition is that notion that it's not just about tearing things down, it's about visioning and building a new future. And I think that this generation of young students gets that inherently, right? That is not a new concept. They are already familiar with the notion of abolition. They're thinking about racial justice issues in a much deeper way than certainly my generation had access to do. And so I feel very hopeful, actually, about the future, because I feel like the students that I'm teaching now are really primed to be part of that building, of that visioning, of something different, that we can do things different. But some of it starts with just acknowledging and looking at the ways in which we have perpetrated harm, even again as we're attempting to sort of critique or question the system's efficacy. And so I really think we have to build that into how we're teaching professionals to think about their profession, to be self-reflective about the role that the profession has played and continues to play in perpetrating harm. We really need to deeply listen to the families that have been most impacted by this system. And the way we do that, and that is how we get at the heart of the true narrative, the actual impact of the system, is by really listening to the families that are most impacted. And that means really not just listening, it's not storytelling. It goes beyond that. It is hearing stories, but then also engaging with youth, with parents, with families that have been impacted by these systems, and having them help shape the future that we need to see.
So, storytelling, old practice in humanity, around the fireside, sitting, telling stories, how wisdom is passed. And I think also it gives people the realization that it's like almost a form of reflection / healing, also to talk, to just say what's up and what's going on, especially when someone really listens. It like almost makes you feel real.
What did it feel like to find my identity and reconcile? It's a question, right? So it's surreal.
I think my whole life, even when I was in foster care, when I was growing up, there was this weird narrative that somebody like me wouldn't be able to take care of myself.
The people that had raised me, I was not allowed to be around anymore. And that was taken away from me. And that was just another thing that I was restricted from because of who I was changing into, which was a person in care. Because that was my identity at that point in time.
My behavior did definitely change. I have never want to hear what anyone else thinks about me anymore. They have never want to hear that I could do good or be good. I didn't really care about anyone else. I basically gave up.
But it's also for the storyteller and just like the actual experience of telling a story, it's like really important for them to understand what it is that they even care about and what do they like to talk about and what is the way in which they want to communicate ideas that makes them feel happy and feel seen, and what does their voice sound like, and the way that when you tell a story it allows you to communicate for what your needs are in life in general and just like speak more from your chest and sing and have an opinion, and it really is important for those reasons also. The impact of storytelling, I feel for me, that's almost more important is how it affects the person who tells the story.
So at the Defender Association in the Child Advocacy Unit, actually this past year, we added peer advocates to our interdisciplinary teams. And I think that this is such an amazing asset to our teams. We have 4 peer advocates that have been working with us. All of them have their own history within the child welfare system, whether it be on the dependency side or on the delinquency side, whether it's in Philadelphia or in other counties here in Pennsylvania, I think also potentially other states as well. But they just bring such a wealth of lived experience to our interdisciplinary teams, and they help so much with our advocacy, especially for our older youth clients. I think sometimes having both attorneys and social workers who've been doing this for so many years is obviously amazing, but I think having younger people who share that lived experience with our clients and also are maybe a little bit closer in age to them just helps them build that rapport with our entire team in a different way. And I think the great thing about having so many people on our team is that we can all play different roles, that everyone might on one case be the lead person, be the person that that client has a really, really strong connection with, and everybody else kind of fills in some other gaps. But I think that that just gives our clients that space to really go with whoever they're driving with in that moment and feel that support in many different layers.
Like, often you get like, you get it. Like, you have someone that kind of understands you, that just gets it. Like, us peers, we don't have too big of a problem with building like rapport in the relationships with our clients, because I've been through the same thing, right? Who best suited to help someone and someone who has walked that road and been through it? Like, yeah, it is hard. I'm not gonna curse, even though I curse all the time. Like, the system is shit, right? And it's traumatic, and I recognize that. I see you, I hear you, and I'm gonna walk with you through that. Now, that's completely different than, say, a case manager from DHS or, an agency social worker we have.
My one to hopes is, I guess, having more workers who on top of it, just having more support with the system, just being like with your advocate, with all the people who's a part of DHS, because I had a good, I'm not gonna lie, I had a good experience being in DHS, even though I thought it was gonna be awful. But I actually had a good experience with my attorneys, with my advocate. I still talk to my advocates to this day. They're a part of my life. They're a part of my family, to be honest, because they've been with me since I was in care. So I would say, yeah, just having that and them just being connected with you and actually doing a job is most important, because I feel like the youth need that love and support, because some people don't get it or don't know how to show it or receive it. So I feel like just that by them just being supportive, being there, doing a job, showing up, questioning me, just seeing what I could do more important, even to my judge. My judge, it was so amazing to know that my judge knows so much good things about me. So, yeah.
Not everybody has a village. You might not have the father, you might not have your mother, you might not have your father, you might not have no grandma, no auntie, or nobody to help you with your child. But you have to remain focused, because if you're not doing good for yourself, your child is not going to be okay. So if you do have help, appreciate that help, because not everybody has help. I'm one of those people, thank God I had help. You know, I had his dad, I had people to help me. So if you are one of the people that don't have help or is just experiencing bad things and you know you're not okay enough to ask for help, don't be prideful. If you can ask for help, ask for that help. Use your village, use your aunties, use your uncles, use your mother, use your grandfather, whoever it is that help.
If there's one thing that I have to say that I would hope change in the future for our young people, is to celebrate them. Applaud them for the trying. Don't let them be what's written about them on the paper. Help them change the cards in the hand that they've been dealt. Help them change their narrative. Let them know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's how you moving forward when you make those mistakes. I hope that the juvenile justice system and the foster care system allow the youth to come back and ask for their opinion. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? They're very, very, very strong. They're very resilient. They will tell you the truth. I didn't like that. That didn't work. And we can really listen to them and build from that. I think so many times we're putting things into place that it looks good on paper, but we're not asking the people who actually have to live this thing, how would that make them feel? Not all answers are going to be implemented, right? Like, they may not agree with everything. But a simple ask will do. Showing these young people some empathy. They have been through a lot. I think we can plant seeds and we may not see them grow, but at least we know we may have impacted one person.
So I always tell myself this, and I try to live by this. It's be the person that you wanted to be when you were the youngest you remember. And that's because we were so innocent at that age, and we didn't know about a lot of adversity. So being able to just be young and keep your mind young, and also be able to just understand that I want to be a good person. And I tell all of my young people that be a good person, whatever that means to you. Be a good person, be able to support others, and just be mostly authentically and transparently yourself. So
to like put other people on, like, I guess, you know, people say gatekeeping. Like, I feel like you shouldn't be gatekeeping resources that can help everybody. You know, put everybody on. You know, somebody struggling with something, but you know about something that can help them, give them the information. You don't have to, gatekeep. So put people on.
I think as much of as a huge radical level change that is needed in a system in the human services sector, I think if you didn't see hope, if you didn't see change, then why work in this sector, right? Like, there's always going to be systemic issues. I don't know that we can ever completely solve the things that need to be solved. I think there is a more humane approach to a lot of things, but I think the work that we do matters and will help in small increments bring about change. It's kind of like a small cog in the system and that's why I continue to work, because otherwise it's a very bleak system, right? Like, if you think too long about it, it can end up being very depressing. But I know that the work that we do matters, and I know that it makes change. And so it gives me hope for wider systemic change.
But I think a reminder, you don't know what people have going on. You don't know what your social workers have going on. A friend of mine was unloading groceries one Tuesday afternoon and got hit by a drunk driver at 4 in the afternoon and woke up in the hospital and her legs were amputated. I was really sad about that, and she said it could be worse. All I lost were my legs. And so to remember that, like, put everything in perspective. Today's a rough day, tomorrow is better, and at least there are some things that you're not thinking about. I get up in the morning and don't ever think about walking. And this young lady every day has to think about walking. And so we can't take any of it for granted, and just be kind to people. Extend grace. You don't know what kind of life people are building for themselves, but be kind.
I think the hope is that we get to a point where I don't have a job, that there are the supports and resources and preventative things in place for people who maybe just need to learn to parent a little bit better, that might just need a little bit of help, that they get those things, and that cases don't need to become court involved, that we can kind of front load cases where they might get a call into the Department of Human Services to say, this thing allegedly happened, this event allegedly happened, but that then the appropriate resources are put in place, the appropriate trainings or funding or, whatever it might be that family needs is put in place before we even need to have a shelter care hearing or for the department to get an order of protective custody for a client. I think it's interesting to work in child welfare because the hope would be that we don't need to exist at some point in time, right? That like the world would just be such a better place and that everyone's needs are being met, and that maybe if someone comes to the realization that they can't parent temporarily or maybe permanently, that there are avenues that they can take that don't include child welfare. Is that a pipe dream? Probably. But I think it's realistic, right? Like it's a realistic way to think that like you have to have that amount of hope, because if you don't, then what's the point, kind of?
So it's extremely important. For one of the things that I love to advocate for, even like within the community, it's like community education and know your rights. Like know your rights. I should not have to work at a law firm to know what's legal and what's not legal for individuals to do. We need accountability, and by you knowing your rights, you can force others accountable. So that person is walking into your home, you said, what? I didn't have food? Is that the allegation? Here's my refrigerator. Hey, I got food. Case closed, right? But when we don't know and we allow people to just dig to come up with something, not saying that all case managers are like that, not saying all investigations are like that, right? I do recognize that we in Philly has gotten slightly further and slightly better. I can't take that away from our agency. I do recognize and understand like our agency, DHS, actually pays for me to fight them. Hey, it's a win-win. But you still, as individual people, should understand and know your rights. Take me to court. You have things called safety plans now where your child can possibly be removed voluntarily and like given to someone else without court supervision because you as a parent volunteer. But it can be like you even volunteer to do this or I'm going to take you to court. So you're scared and you're just like, is that really volunteer? Like, whatever. But you have a right to say no. You have a right to say, I want to call counsel right now. Right? You have a right to say, I'm going to call CLS right now, right? We tell the community all the time, like, make the phone call. If they're knocking on your door, or you're in the beginning of an investigation, or you're a mother, which we see often too, especially since Philly, we do deal with, we do have a huge like epicenter in the opioid epidemic. So you see things like children being born with drugs in our system, and those children being taken.
I really envision a world in which we don't need family policing. And I think we really need to work toward making that vision a reality. And I think the way we do that is moving away from the notion that that family policing is the way to keep families safe, because frankly, it's not working, right? It is not working. It is not keeping children safe. It is not keeping parents safe. It is not helping families thrive. And I think we're so invested in this notion that sort of the way the system functions by having, mandatory reporting and investigations and referrals made and family separation being sort of the interventions that we offer families, that we've really lost sight of two things. One, how much harm we're causing to families in utilizing those modes of punishment, and I really do see them as punishment in our work with families. And two, from just sort of the bigger picture of what would it take to really have families be able to not only be safe but thriving. I think we do that through a massive shift of resources away from the family policing system. We do that through strengthening our schools, through strengthening, access to childcare and pre-K programs. Ideally universal access to childcare and pre-K and after-school programs and, things like that, through things like universal health care, universal basic income, right? These are things that we actually know work. These are the infrastructure that families need in order to thrive. And yet we're in this mode where we're fighting about whether these are worthy, resources to fund. And the reality is those are the things. Those are the things that families need. They need an income floor. They need access to healthcare, access to quality healthcare, to quality, mental health or substance abuse treatment. That doesn't solve all the problems. Families will continue to have crises and continue to have challenges, but communities need the support and the ability to actually solve their own problems too, right? To kind of do what they need to do in order to help. And I do believe that communities are capable of that. And when family policing intervenes, they actually disrupt the community's ability to support families in the way that they actually need, because it becomes about the mandates of the family policing system as opposed to the family's actual needs.
So one of my biggest learnings that I think I've brought with me to my work at Children's Rights is when I was in the courtroom, there was such tension and animosity between parents advocates and parents attorneys and children's advocates and children's attorneys. And I've sat with that, and I had a great relationship with parent advocates and parent attorneys, but not all of my colleagues did, and I sat with why was there that tension? Why is it like this, And it's because often people were feeling like in order to protect or save or ensure a child is happy and healthy, that we need to rip them from their parents. Parents were viewed and have been viewed and still are often viewed as the enemy, and as opposed to the person who loves and supports and also wants the best and knows what's best for their children, And so now as I do my work as a mother, right, a Black mother of two beautiful Black little boys, I think about that tension, and it makes my work at Children's Rights that much more sort of entrenched in ensuring that people understand that children have a right to their family, their very own family, their parents, right? And that we do so much harm and cause so much trauma by deciding that it's best to destroy that natural bond, and to rip and separate children and families apart. And so much of my work is changing the narrative that has developed with this system, which is that parents who are poor or who are Black, they can't support their children. They can't be there for their children. They shouldn't be the ones caring for their children. That's what this system was built upon here in the United States, These ideas that poor people, immigrant families, Black people have no business, can't be happy, supporting or taking care of their children. And so let's take their children and send them somewhere else, right? And even when we walk into family court today, those same narratives still ring true. The judgment about people who are experiencing and living in poverty or who are not white, right? They reign supreme in family courts all across America. And those are the kind of narratives that I'm working to change, to shift with so many people who have, paved the path for me. We're sitting in Philadelphia right now, and I can just think about all of the work and scholarship for decades that Professor Dorothy Roberts has done. And I've learned so much from her being bold and brave and writing about these experiences of Black families and Black mothers, and those are the kinds of learnings that drive my work to do better, to do different for Black children. And I can only imagine, what if somebody, because my parents were poor and because every day we didn't have a ton of food, or because me and my brothers shared a room, and in fact, all of us lived in one room at some point, and what if somebody had decided that's not good enough and ripped me from my family, There was nothing but love in my household, and that's enough to keep a child happy, to keep families together. But that also makes me do this work of thinking about how systems have been built here to respond to people in need in a really punitive way, right? Instead of saying, how can we help? And instead of providing resources to help, we take away people's children and call that help, right? And that's not help. And I'm thinking about the ways in which Black children and families are targeted across this country. And, you've probably talked to people who have talked about the over-surveillance of Black children, Black families, Black communities, and how that leads people into the family policing system. And the other part of that is the underdevelopment, the lack of resources put into Black communities, And so much of my work is about not seeing the family policing system as the response to children or families in need, but building supports in community. And I'm thinking about, various organizations here in Philly that do that deep work of helping families. I don't know if you've been in touch with Yeah Philly and Kendra Vanderwater, but it's a really amazing Philly organization that works with young people who've been impacted by the youth justice system here, and gets out in community and provides groceries for families, right? Help with appointments for their pets, and teaching skills to young people. And the work is directly with impacted people. It's not telling them what you're going to provide or doing things for them without having them on board. The work is together, and that's what we're trying to do at Children's Rights and in my work, to work really closely with impacted people and let them drive the solutions around how we get out of this harmful, traumatic, sad, oppressive situation that Black people find themselves in.
I really do believe that we can realize a vision of a world without family policing. And I think what gives me hope that that is actually a possibility is what I see as an ever-strengthening movement of folks that do see that. And I think that the way we get there is not just families organizing. Families absolutely need to organize and fight back. But I think there is a critical role for the professions, and I sort of say that maybe with air quotes around it, but the professions that are attached to these systems. I really do believe that the legal profession, the social work profession, other other professional stakeholders that are invested in the existing system really need to reckon with the role they have played in perpetrating harm. And in reckoning with that, it means really taking a step back, building critical connections with the families that have been most impacted, and supporting those families in realizing a vision for a different kind of world that we could live in. It is within reach, but it means really being ready to cede advantages, to share power, right? And to really, leverage the strength that comes from the families that have been impacted by the system, that are organizing for a different world. I believe we can get there, but it's also going to require hard work to get us there. And so I hope that the little piece of that I can contribute to is by helping really rethink the legal profession's role in envisioning that world.
At an early age and throughout my professional career, surrounded by mentors and quality and passionate people, social workers, and in ways connected to that profession, who really were committed to doing their best job. And to do your best job means you're not so much looking at did Omar change? Did he do something different? No, you did your best job. So, my big deal, I learned about this a couple decades ago too, is the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And there are 4, but one of my prominent ones is don't make assumptions. Always do your best. And those 2 are what keep me going, and that's what I try to instill in people who I work with, who work for me.
If I had to pick one significant thing that I think needs to be modified in the care system is the fact that there's not enough accountability. Of course, in every system, there are failings because nothing's perfect. And we have to remember that the people who are responsible for these children and young people in the care system, they are also people. It can be a very emotionally distressing career. And you've got a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. If I look at it from the perspective of, social workers, carers, and other corporate professionals. However, the main issue isn't the fact that things go wrong. The main issue is that we don't have in my opinion, a secure way of rectifying those things. We need a system where there's more accountability, because in order to make change, you've got to know what's gone wrong. And it's all well and good having these tick boxes of, things we put in place that supposedly made an improvement in one area. But when one hand isn't talking to the other, things slip through the cracks and you're left with victims of the care system. And it's inevitable. Having traumatic separation is already something that's going to leave a print in you probably for the rest of your life. Of course, it's down to you to navigate ways of healing from it. But what would, significantly help, and is also the responsibility of the system, is if we were able to keep track, using statistics, using verbatim, and accountability of where we go wrong. We go wrong in different areas, and I'd say some of those areas include, how people are encouraged to, build a sense of identity, in terms of just general well-being support, and also apathy, because there is a lot of apathy in the care system. But however, what I find is that you can't make people care. That's not something that's humanly possible. No one can make another person care. But with accountability, that fixes that error. Because once we are accountable for our actions, and we have, more than one eye looking over what's going on, it means that it's more likely that the errors that we make are not only corrected, but we learn from the patterns of those errors so that we don't have the same issues that affect the most vulnerable people in society.
Those things, there's so much anger and vengeance and revenge and senses of separation, whether that be between the marginalized and the powerful, the decision makers and the vulnerable. And everybody in their own position is vulnerable somehow. Everybody is a powerful person in some part of their life. And it's like even the most powerful, wealthy people will need time to change. And we need to be patient and compassionate as they do, and really hold a sense of firm love as they move in that direction. And for all people to a sense that we need to be together as we move there, and it's gonna take a long time, and that's okay, and we'll keep trying our best. That.
One thing I definitely want to leave with people who were raised in the care system, whether it was foster care or adoption. There's one thing that I realized about people who were raised in that way, and it's kind of stuck with me when I realized it. When you look at fictional characters like let's say Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Bruce Wayne, Batman, Clark Kent, Superman, the one thing they all have in common is that they were estranged as children. They were, their parents, for whatever reason, they were removed from their parents. And I know it's fictional, but we do have a superpower. And what I noticed about myself when I left care, despite all the confusion and the time that you need to heal from what you've just gone through, you develop a resilience that no one else has. Similar to these fictional characters, which I find so interesting that they all have that in common. Somebody knows that people who have experienced traumatic separation or that kind of adversity growing up, there's something special about you, because you're forced to find yourself in a way that no one else is. Often, when you are raised in what I call a typical nuclear family, or with certain privileges that some people don't have, you are told who you are because of your environment. Whereas when you are forced to be, to raise yourself to a degree, you learn yourself in a way that no one else does. You become more adaptable. You're able to adapt to situations and people almost as a survival instinct. So regardless of, how much pain you might carry and reflect on from your past, one thing that helps me was realizing that I have a superpower, and I think so does everyone else.
When England decided to review the children's social care sector, every single area of the children's social care sector, they decided to review, and I was a part of that process as an expert by experience because of my care experience of coming through the care system, and also I was able to present the voice of the Black care experience. Now, for me, that was really important to be a part of that process, and I'll tell you why. Going back in history, in 1984, or in the 1980s, there was a Blackening Care Group who put together, had their own conferences in the 1980s, and put together their voice in a report called the Blackening Care Report in 1984. And I would say that group of young people who are adults now, much older than me, their report was very significant in how it helped to shape the Children's Act 1989. And it was about how to raise Black children in the care system. It was so poignant that that group of young people and their report got the Children's Act to say how children need to be raised based on their ethnicity, their race, their culture. But not only that, there was a guidance that was attached to the Children's Act as well. But 40 years later, it's almost as if government forgot what they needed to do. They forgot to press for or push for the local authorities, the corporate parents, to continue to make sure that they were caring for children based on their ethnicity, their religion, their race, their identity. Because then 40 years later, we're here in 2024, it's not been taken up. So when I got the opportunity to sit at that table, it was a part of me reminding the government, hey, hello, you're reviewing the care system, review what you haven't done. review what you put in place in the 1980s and review that you've not carried that forward. The local authorities, the corporate parents have not carried that responsibility forward. So it was really important to sit at the table to remind them. Okay, in reminding them, we didn't get an outcome where they took on board in the final report to say that, okay, we're gonna make this one of the action points for government to take forward. It wasn't taken forward. But for me, the beauty of us having that voice at the table, it kind of snowballed into a national recognition of the work that we've been doing. So in terms of that, we have a charter where certain organisations within the sector, whether it's a local authority or a charity that works within the sector, can come and sit around our table, our Black Care Experience Charter table, so we can guide them as to how your organisation can pick up where the government has left off. And it's good because we have these organisations now coming to meet with the Black Care Experience team on a 6-monthly basis to say, okay, we've done this, what do we do next? Because they themselves are thinking, well, if the government's not going to push us to do it, we're going to actually be proactive and not reactive and get this done. So whilst we didn't get an outcome for the government to say these are the action points for the care review going forward, from the care review going forward, it began to spotlight the work that we've been doing. And so I mentioned about our conference. When we did our first conference, there was only 30 people. Year on, year out, we've had 200 people at our conferences. So it went from 30 to 200. So even though the government haven't taken on board what we've said, we are working the grounds. We're doing all the groundwork to then maybe in the future present again. We don't know. I'm not sure of if that's the way forward because the groundwork is being done. I think government just need to catch up with us and say, okay, you're doing the work. How can we then support what you're doing? Because we know that we're doing what needs to be done, and there are more voices around the table. Our table now, there's people in the community, our Black community. We've got allies who don't look like us who want to be a part of what we're doing, and then we have certain people in the local authorities or in the children's social care sector who are coming around our table to say, well, how can we help? So there are voices, strong voices that want to make a difference. But as I said, it was important for me to sit at that table to remind the government that, hey, in 1984, you promised, you set a precedent because of a group of powerful young people back in the 1980s. And now we are seeing the same issues that they highlighted in 84 come full circle 40 years later in 2024. So that's the importance of why we got sat at the table, to bring it up again, and it continues to be highlighted.
And so for those who are, not feeling sure about what they should be doing or how they should show up in this work, I just want to say, show up as authentically who you are. And when we speak truth, right, that's all that matters.